Good morning, everyone. Welcome to, I think it's class 2 of our module 2. We started a little bit early this morning, but there's no time change tomorrow, unfortunately. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and leave it over to Mr. Hill. And if you need me, just give me a shout.
Thank you very much, Miguel. Good morning to you. Okay, so I'll perhaps just, it's on my clock, it's 13:59 at the moment, so I'll just wait 2 more minutes for people to show up. It's a pity to start when some people might be joining partway through. So, but on the other hand, thank you to those people who are on time. I appreciate that very much. It always makes a big difference when people show up on time. We have a lot to do actually today. We've got quite a lot of information to give, and I'm just a bit concerned about the amount of time that we have available, so I won't wait too long. So make me feel jealous. What temperature is it in Bahamas at the moment? Anybody know the approximate?
It's 79 degrees in Freeport.
Oh my goodness. Okay. We use mainly centigrade here, and we're presently on 9, so that's fairly cool. Not as cold as it has been earlier in the week. Earlier in the week, it was absolutely freezing. But no threat of snow just at the minute. I remember a few years ago, it actually snowed at Easter, so there's still time. I actually couldn't get to work on the Tuesday after Easter because the snow was so deep on the roads, and they were totally unprepared for it. Took me about 2 hours to get 3 miles to work in Bolton.
We wouldn't have to worry about that here.
Yeah, exactly. And I know that's why I'd much rather be there, to be honest with you, Colleen. Yep. I was in Jordan 2 or 3 years ago, and a lot of the staff who work in the hotel were from the Philippines. And it was January, and it's in the Middle East, so you perhaps wouldn't expect it to be too cold there, but it was snowing just a little bit, just a fine amount of snow. But all the staff from the Philippines thought it was wonderful. They're all running around outside just to see this snow. And of course, they didn't have any machinery to clear snow from the roads. So the following day, it was quite difficult to get around and get to work. Okay, I'll just wait two more minutes and then we'll start. Jordan can be hot in the summer though, very hot. Probably like Bahamas, I guess. Good morning, Shanika.
Morning.
Welcome to you. Okay, perhaps it's 2 minutes past 9, so perhaps we should start. You remember last week we talked about service and the customer experience, and I introduced the idea of Covey's 7 habits. So I'd just like to talk a little bit about those. We've still to cover in the next session and this session, communication process, personality types, cultural issues in communication, client advisory and relationship models, and building trust and business ethics. So I had updated the material, but I've sent a PDF of these slides to you just a few minutes ago. So if you look in your inbox, hopefully you will have received it. I guess it's because it's got an attachment, it might be in your junk file, I suppose, but it should be there. If anybody hasn't received that, please let me know and I'll send it again to you. But I copied I returned an email to the one that Miguel sent this morning, so hopefully you've all received it. Okay, so looking at these personal skills and Stephen Covey, I'll just skip through the first couple of slides because we talked about these last week, but we talked about dependence, independence, interdependence, and then these sharpening the saw. So I'd like to talk a little bit more about this now. So one of the key things is to be able to form habits. And I did some coaching courses a few years ago, and they told us a very interesting fact that you can actually form a new habit, either good or bad, within 21 days. And at first I thought, gosh, if that were true, wouldn't that be great? But actually, it probably is true. I've done an experiment with it several times, and certainly it works for me. So there are certain habits that we do want to form, and I would suggest to you that all of these Stephen Covey habits are very useful habits to build into your skill bases. But there's three things about habits. First is the knowledge, then there's skill, and then there's a desire. So it's what to and why to, how to, and because you want to. And clearly the desire has a big impact on whether you're going to be successful in something or not. When I did coaching, I used to say to people, on a score of 1 to 10, something that we'd discussed, and they said, oh yeah, that's really good. I said, what's on a score of 1 to 10, what's the likelihood that you'll do this within the next 4 weeks? And I knew that if they gave me a score of 6 or less, they weren't going to do it. So they were just stringing me a line, really. But deciding on some important things and building them into your skill arsenal is a good thing to do. And practice is obviously part of that. Habit is the intersection of knowledge, skill, and desire. That's what Stephen Covey says. So there's these private victories: being proactive, beginning with the end in mind, and putting first things first. And these are called private victories, as I mentioned last week. And just talk a little bit about proactive. I don't want to talk too much about it because I guess that some of you will know these words already. But being proactive is effectively taking the initiative, identifying and exploiting opportunities, and trying to take control of a situation. So it's the opposite of reactive. We react to something if we haven't expected it to happen, and sometimes we react badly. Sometimes our behavior isn't great when we're reactive, but if we're thinking ahead to situations, we can sometimes, not always, but sometimes think through what might happen in important situations, and then be prepared to take the initiative rather than waiting for something to happen and then react to it. So perhaps even by taking an action that could prevent something from happening. But being proactive can also be used in the sense that sellers, people who are in sales, can be either reactive or proactive. Proactive sellers tend to take the initiative and tend to find opportunities. Reactive sellers are those people who just wait for somebody to ask for something and then they take effectively an order. I actually don't call those people sellers at all. They're order takers as opposed to proactive people who are finding sales. So some examples of reactive statement, you might say, there's nothing I can do, I can't do that, or I have to do that. In other words, you're being forced to do something you don't want to do, as opposed to a proactive statement, which might be, I have no practical alternative. So in other words, I'm still being forced into it, but I'm taking a decision to do something practical about it. And as opposed to I can't do that, actually saying I won't do it. I'm making a decision, I won't do it. Well, I have to do it, somebody's forcing me to do it, as opposed to I have decided to do it. Again, I'm in control. So the proactive approach to a mistake is to acknowledge it instantly, correct it, and learn from it, which is something to think about, I think. So do you want to be somebody who life happens to me, what happens to me, or what I make happen. I prefer to be somebody who makes things happen rather than lets things happen to me. It's a choice that you can make, the difference between proactive and reactive. But another thing to think about is your circle of influence, the things that you feel actually in control of. And there's a whole list of things here where you may have control over certain things. You might have control of over your hobbies or over some of your home life, but lots of things could be at least partly outside your control, your influence, and those tend to be called circle of concern. You may well be concerned about your health, but don't think you can do anything about it. Unfortunately, in some cases, people can't because of serious illnesses. We certainly have no control over pending legislation. You probably don't have much control over your new boss. You may or may not have control over whether you get a promotion or not. You may or may not have control over when you can get your holidays. Trust issues, do you have control over that? But the interesting thing is that the more that you try and take control, first of all, recognize that, be content with the things that you can control, and don't worry too much about the things that you can't control because they really are beyond your control. But those things where you might be able to take control, start trying to be proactive. For example, if you 2 or 3 years ago, probably 3 years ago now, I went for a health checkup thinking that I was very healthy for a man of my age and present condition, but actually I was told I was overweight, and they wanted me to take statins, which is something which controls your cholesterol, which I really didn't want to do. I was quite angry with myself for being in a situation where somebody at the doctor would tell me I was overweight. Now, almost all my friends take these statins, these medication. I said to the doctor, do you mind giving me 6 months and I'll try and get this under control? And in those 6 months, I lost 10 kilos. I brought my cholesterol down to below the recommended guideline for somebody of my age, ethnicity, and gender, because it differs depending on those 3 things: age, ethnicity, and gender. I got it down and I took control of it, and I'm still taking control of it. I do exercise every morning. I get up before everybody else in the house every morning. I do 45 minutes of exercise, and I've been proactive. I've taken the initiative, and I don't need to take statins, which I'm particularly happy about. But a lot of those things outside in this circle of concern, you can actually do this too a little bit. You can actually start pushing your circle of influence out and start taking control of some of these things. And the circle of concern is actually a stressful area, actually. I might be worried about that. Whereas circle of influence, I'm in control of that. It's a very much better feeling to be in control of these things. So it's something to think about. Take control of things rather than worrying about things where possible. But to be proactive, what do you have to do really? Number one, stay focused on a solution, not a problem. So many people tell me, oh, I've got so many problems. I actually know somebody, a neighbor, and she's always telling us about problems, but she doesn't want to discuss solutions. She just seems to be happy to be unhappy with these things. So try to stop worrying about problems and start thinking about solutions. Rely on yourself, analyze steps in advance, set realistic goals. Do you actually have goals, achievable goals? Consistency in anything that you do or say, and actively participate. Rather than being an observer, be a participator. Try and get involved in things. The second habit is begin with the end in mind. This is really interesting thought. For example, How would you want to be regarded by those attending your retirement? Or worse still, I guess, your funeral. If you could actually listen at your funeral, what would you want people to be saying about you? Would you want people to be saying, oh, this person was a really great person. They were very influential. They were a great inspiration. They were very successful. Or this person always had problems. They didn't have solutions. They were always weighed down by their concerns. What kind of person do you want to be? What kind of person do you want to be seen to be by other people? Because believe me, people do make judgments about you, people all the time, even your friends. Just think about the friends that you've got. You will have an impression about those people in just the same way that people will have an impression about you. So what impression do you want them to have? But beginning with the end in mind is, first of all, beginning with you. What do you want? Have you defined goals? Have you planned ways that you're going to achieve goals? I saw some very interesting research a few years ago, and it was conducted by, and I confess I can't remember which one of the main American universities, but they did a survey to identify, bearing in mind these are top students in one of the top universities. I don't think it was Harvard, but I can't remember. But what made some students more successful than others? And this was a long-term study, so they gathered data on a lot of students, and several years later they gathered the students together again, and it was very interesting that 5% of the students were more successful, more wealthy, happier than the other 95%. Very, very interesting. And the one distinguishing thing that really set them apart, that they weren't the sons or daughters of famous actors or millionaires or multimillionaires, nothing like that. Those successful people were the ones who, even at a young age as students, had very clear life goals. They knew exactly why they were at university. They knew exactly what they wanted to achieve. They knew where they wanted to be in their life. They had a plan how to achieve it. They'd been proactive. They'd set themselves life goals. These can be changed, by the way, if you realize that the goal isn't something that you want as you get older. And I must confess that I've changed a number of my goals over time. But these people had goals and they were working to achieve them. So, as I say, begin with yourself. What is it that you want from life? Define goals and then plan ways to achieve it. Stephen Covey says, your most important work is always ahead of you, never behind you. But just think about when I'm traveling abroad, or when you're traveling somewhere. If you've no idea where your destination is, it doesn't matter which way you go. But if you've got a very clear idea, I'm going to visit my brother in 2 weeks on the south coast, and it's about 220 miles. And I've got a destination. I've got various routes, and the route will depend on Google Maps on the day, telling me which is the best route depending on the traffic conditions. So I'm going to be very flexible, and I'm going to change route according to conditions to achieve the best outcome. And we can all do that if we have a clear idea of where we want to be. So having goals, both work goals, both personal goals, is relationship goals, really important. Covey encourages the creation of a personal mission statement. Focus on what you want to be, or your office to be, and what you want to accomplish. Incorporate the principles, values upon which being and doing these things will be based. So what are your personal principles? Have you thought about that? What are your important values? Do you have actual clarity on what you want? People are working harder than ever because they lack clarity and vision. They aren't getting very far. They, in essence, are pushing a rope with all of their might, as opposed to pulling a rope. Just imagine how difficult it is to push a rope forward. But if you've got a plan, you can actually move forward with the plan in mind, take steps. And if you're not being successful, consider, is this the right plan? Are there alternative steps you can take to achieve your plan? This is a really important one, and it's very important for customer service. The other two are, by the way, certainly I was very proactive when I was dealing with my relationships with clients, and I always had goals for my relationships. So even within relationship working, the first two goals are very important, but this is particularly important. Put first things first. What do we mean about that? What we mean is plan your time carefully. Where we spend our time tells us about our priorities. We should use our goals. We've talked about the goals. Do you have goals? You should use the goals that you have and priorities to schedule your time. Be careful, because time should be managed in week chunks instead of daily chunks to allow for variances. But this is about time management and delegation, and it's about urgent things as opposed to important things. So I want to tell you a little story, because I used this when I was an area manager. I had a number of managers working for me, and I taught them all about this time system that Stephen Covey talks about. So he has a 4 box. Don't mind doing it with that. I've got a pen thing somewhere which will help if I can see it. Oh, here it is. And it goes like this. It's urgent, not urgent, important, not important. Where do you think most people work? This is a question now, so hopefully you're going to join me with this. Do you think you work in box 1, box 2, box 3, or box 4? Where do you think you should be working, and where are you working? Anybody?
I think people work on box 2.
Okay, great. That's good if you think that. At this stage, most people say that they work on urgent things. So it's good that you said important, because actually you're right to say that. Urgent is stressful. Urgent is, oh my God, I've got to get this done. Oh, I haven't got enough time. Working on important things is really important. These are important things, but it's without the stress. So let me tell you a story. I got a guy called Dave. And Dave, he was probably one of the least effective members of my team. I haven't been working with this unit very often, but even before I got there, people warned me that Dave was a guy who hadn't been particularly successful, never achieved his targets, always was room for improvement in people's assessment of him. And one day, he was a nice guy, but one day I saw him and his face was bright red. And I said, Dave, what's the matter? And he just said, oh, Mike, I'm just so busy. So I said, okay, please, whatever you're doing this afternoon, cancel it, come into my room, bring all your work with you, because he told me how much work he got. He just had so much work, he didn't know where to start. And he said, I just can't do that. I'm just too busy. So I said, honestly, I'm really concerned about you. He looks as though he's going to have a heart attack at any time. I'm not joking. This guy looked totally stressed out and about to collapse. So, okay, he came into my room and he carried a basket, and I don't know if you can see the camera, but the basket was wobbling. It was a pile of paper that was coming into the room. And I thought, oh my God, that's a lot of paper. So he plonked it all down. Then he went back out to his desk and brought a second basket, which was the same. So now he's got 2 huge wobbling piles of paper, and no wonder he can't cope. So I asked him to tell me what were his work goals. And clearly his work goals, most of them were the key tasks that we've been given, the key performance indicators. So key performance indicators was a key element of his goals. It wasn't everything. His goals were also to do a great job and to have good relationships with clients, those kind of things. But achieving his KPIs was a big issue. So what we did with these two huge piles of work was using the guide of KPIs and other important goals agreed between me and him. We put all his work into 1, 2, 3, or 4. But guess which was the biggest pile? Box 4. Not urgent and not important. I've written these words probably not in the right place, really. So I should have put box 4 is not urgent and not important. Box 3 is not urgent. So most of these things were over here. 3 was like this. 2 was smaller, and 1 was actually quite small. So we actually assessed, we did a time analysis of the work that he had outstanding, and it was probably about 5 hours. 5 hours work. These were deadline things. These were things that should have been done a few days ago. These were things that he was going to get in trouble for, or was getting in trouble for, because he hadn't done them already. So those definitely needed to be done. So even though he'd been complaining about he didn't have time, getting on with these things was the most important thing. But then I told him, get rid of these things. They're not urgent, they're not important. Why do you even care about them? They're not affecting your goals. I'm authorizing you, I couldn't tell him to do it, but I'm authorizing you to bung that stuff. And he did. Most of that stuff was actually discarded. The not urgent things, he also kind of put to the back, but then he managed to focus his time more and learn to focus his time more on the important things. The other thing that I asked him to do, just let me get rid of this, I can't, there we go. The other thing that I asked him to do was to do a 5-day timetable like this so that's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. His normal working day was 7 hours for 5 days like this. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We assessed that approximately 1 hour every day couldn't be planned for because he got urgent post, urgent telephone calls, those kind of things. But actually he could plan when he was going to do the other things. So what we then did was plan his various tasks. He had to do a customer visit every day. So he preferred to go out after lunch to do his customer visits. So most days he would plan customer visits here for an hour or an hour and a half, whatever it would be. When he got important tasks that needed to be done, let's say he had something with a deadline of Friday, he would plan to do that on Wednesday, important task. And he would be putting in his important tasks. He would be putting in customer visits. He would be building in all of these things, but he's now got different folders, a folder for each day. And that was for each day, his planned work. So now instead of having a pending file, he's got a planned work file. Just think how proactive this is. I'm taking control of my situation. I am actually planning when I'm going to do important things. So he's got a planned work file for every day. And the beauty of this is that if you've done all your planned work for today, occasionally you've got a choice. You can start doing tomorrow's planned work if you want to, or perhaps if you've been working overtime for a long time, give yourself an early evening. Why not? But I've got to tell you, it's a great feeling to be doing tomorrow's planned work today. I'm actually ahead of myself already. I'm creating time that I can do more proactive things. So this is very simply and very quickly what I got Dave to do. About 2 weeks later, I passed him in the car park and I saw him, and his skin was normal English color again. All the red had gone, and I already knew that he was feeling better. So I just said to him, Dave, how are things going? And he said, Mike, you have given me back my life. Just imagine somebody saying that to you. Mike, you have given me back my life. It's quite, I got to say, it's something that I've always remembered, because it was obviously, I'd made a difference. I'd shown him something, I'd helped him to take control, be proactive, take control of the important things in his life. Oh, by the way, for the very first time that year, he exceeded his contracts. He exceeded his performance plan for the year. Can you imagine somebody who was always behind target, actually exceeding his plan? And his previous boss got to hear about this and phoned me up and said, what did you do? How did you manage to get Dave to exceed his plan? What have you done with this guy who everybody else in previous years has written off as being a hopeless case? It's quite interesting. So, as I say, things that statistics show us that we waste 2 hours a day because of a messy desk, because we can't find things, because we miss important appointments, because we're not prepared for meetings, because we're tired or unable to concentrate. In addition, on average, we spend 4 to 5 hours every day in front of the TV, and another 2 hours, probably more than that these days, on social networks. So where are our priorities really? Where are we achieving our goals in all of this? So Professor Randy Push says, you don't find time for important things, you make it by electing not to do something else. You don't find time to do important things, you make it by electing to do something which is less important. And to be able to make that decision, you need to have goals. What are the things that I want to achieve? Just think about this. Time is the only resource that cannot be reused. So as I say, we've got this importance and urgency to decide where to put things. Quadrant 1 is crisis. Quadrant 2 is prevention. We're actually doing great things in there. Relationship building, planning, important activities. Quadrant 3 is interruptions. It's some mails, some phone calls, some meetings, some reports which aren't important. And problem 4 is trivia, busy work. Lots of people do busy work, things that they like doing but don't achieve anything actually. Some mails, some phone calls, some pleasant activities. Chatting by the coffee machine is nice to do, but is it achieving your goals? So as I say, having a time journal, writing down what you do, what things can you delegate, what are gaps in your prime time for wasting, yes, what I can do more effective, and what do I waste other people's time with? Do you waste other people's time by going and chatting about the football match or whatever it would be? Things that could be saved till lunchtime. So have a time journal for a while if you haven't already done this, and work out how you're spending your time and work out the things that can be ditched. This is a copy that I picked up from somewhere else actually, but it's in Russian, but it doesn't matter. It's just the idea of a time management thing, planning tasks on a daily basis. We can actually do that in Outlook these days, and it's actually taken from Outlook. So those are the private victories. The public victories are think win-win, to seek first to understand and to synergize. Now, these are all about working with people. Once we've achieved success with ourselves, with our own organization, we need to have success before we can have lasting success with others. So mastery over ourselves, habits 1, 2, and 3, leads to independence. The public victories 4, 5, and 6 lead to interdependence. This is where I'm working better with other people. So I'm now, having claimed the first 3 victories, which are important for my role at work, I can then focus on these things where I'm working better with other people. So think win-win is habit 4. This is all about negotiation. This is all about being a great negotiator. And to be good at relationships, we need to be good at negotiating. So the business directory says negotiation philosophy is a philosophy in which all parties to an agreement or deal stand to realize their fair share, not 100% of the benefits or profit. But we should be really seeking solutions through which both parties win. That's what win-win means. So we've got 4 choices really. Win-lose, where one person wins and one person loses, so it is good for Y but not for X. Win-win is mutually beneficial, where we both win. Lose-lose is where we both lose, and that's revenge driven. And win-lose, the opposite way around, or lose-win, is capitulation, where the other person wins but you lose. And nobody likes that. So sure, it's great for you if you win and the other person loses. My wife's watching football, I told you, and will be delighted that they're beating Brighton 2-0 at the moment. And we're used to that in games, but in business, when we're working with our clients, it's not a great position to be in that we win and they lose, because people don't like losing. People don't like that kind of behavior, and it makes them feel less comfortable with you. Building strong relationships, it's much better. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't have done that. It's much better to be focusing on a win-win situation where we both win, rather than either we both lose or one of us wins and one of us loses. It's a much better position to be in. So to think win-win, a person who or an organization that approaches negotiations with a win-win attitude possesses 3 vital characteristic traits. Number 1, integrity. You stick with your true feelings, true values, and commitments. Maturity. You're able to express your ideas and feelings with courage and consideration for the ideas and feelings of others. And abundance mentality. There's plenty for everyone. Instead of thinking, oh, I've got to win because it's for me, there's enough for everyone. We can share it and we can both be successful. So I saw some research a few years ago, and business customers of banks, they wanted a number of things from their bank. The first thing they wanted from the bank was integrity. Treat us with integrity. Don't try and cheat us. We trust you, or we want to be able to trust you. Make it that we can trust you. Don't try and trick us into taking something that's we're going to have to pay a large fee for, when there's something cheaper, which is an equally good alternative for us. The second thing that they wanted was that we dealt with their transactions efficiently. That's a business must, really, that we deal with transactions efficiently. The third thing was that we dealt with complaints fairly. So don't try and cheat me with complaints, and fix complaints quickly. I think we talked about complaints last week. And fourthly, the fourth thing was business customers wanted a relationship in most cases with the bank. So for those of you who are bankers, that's a great situation. But I have to say that I talked a lot about relationships with hotels and restaurants last week. And I like the fact that people in the hotels that I go to actually recognize me, know my name, know a little bit about me, perhaps remember the things that I like, the things that I don't like. And I feel as though I have relationships with a lot of places where I go, not just my bank. So we can form relationships with if we make an effort to do it. And it's quite interesting. I've gone to my favorite restaurant with other people. And because I know that a few of them are Turkish and I can speak a few Turkish words, I actually make a special effort to say hello in Turkish. I use different words. I say thank you in Turkish, just a few words. And it's interesting because my friends say, you're really on the case with these people. You're showing that you understand that the Turkish, you're making an effort with them, and they can see that you're making an effort with them. So I make an effort with me. And interestingly, people notice that they make an effort with me. When one side benefits more than the other, that's a win-lose situation. To the winner, it might look like success for a while, but in the long term, it breeds resentment and distrust. That's another of Stephen Covey's sayings. So being a great negotiator is important, but the next thing is seek first to understand and then be understood. This is all about listening to your clients. This is all about being a good listener. The Zen art of listening. 80% of top executives say that listening is the most important skill needed to get things done in the workplace. 80% of top executives say that listening is the most important skill needed to get things done in the workplace. People typically listen at no better than 25% efficiency rate. Remember only about half of what was said during a 10-minute conversation and forget half within 48 hours. So there's types of listening: listening for content, critical listening, being critical and thinking, do I agree with that? Do I not agree with that? Empathetic listening, caring about what people say, sensing their feelings, and active listening, actually actively participating in a conversation. So let's talk a little bit about these types of listening. And Stephen Covey says most people do not listen with the intent to understand, they listen with the intent to reply. And I think I told you last week that I used to spend a lot of time coaching my managers, helping them to achieve the targets. But one of the things that I used to do was listen to the questioning technique and listening to their, or watching, I should say, their listening skills. And you'd be amazed. You could actually see from the body language when they stopped listening, they just couldn't wait to say, they were almost bouncing up and down, waiting to say the next thing that they were ready to say. And quite often they missed really important things that people said to them. The triggers that they're actually looking for. They were desperately trying to get a customer to indicate that they might be interested in something, a product or a service. And they were missing it because they were so desperate to ask the next question. And on occasions, I didn't do this very often because they didn't like it very much, but on occasion, I just had to say, excuse me, Mr. Customer, would you kindly say that again, rather than move on? And sometimes my staff were irritated, but they got used to me and they got into the habit of really listening very carefully to what the customer was saying. You could actually see their eyebrows go up, and this is what they were looking for. This is the fish that they were trying to catch. They were so busy preparing bait and preparing lines and preparing nets and preparing hooks for the fishing that they'd missed the fish. So listen very carefully. I was with a guy in Uganda a few years ago, and he was telling me all kinds of things. And I thought, this guy's telling me a load of rubbish, really. And after about 20 minutes, he said something which totally contradicted something which he'd said earlier. So I just said, well, you surprised me a little bit by saying that, because earlier you said this. I guess I was being a little bit rude, really, but I was just trying to show him that I was listening, and you shouldn't tell lies to to people. And I said, I thought you said this a few moments ago. And he looked at me and he said, the problem with you is you listen too carefully. The problem with you is you listen too carefully. Listening is a really important skill. So seeking first to understand and then to be understood. This habit requires diagnosis to understand. Diagnosis requires effective listening. We spend years learning how to read, to write, to speak, but not how to listen. I mentioned intent to reply a few moments ago, and it's how most of us listen, formulating a response while the other person is still speaking, so therefore missing things that they're saying. This is listening through our own paradigm. We're listening through our own senses and feelings, our own experiences, rather than listening closely to what the customer is telling us. The recipes for success: mix 3 times of listening with 1 time of talking. 3 times of listening with 1 time of talking. A lot of the salespeople that I've met over time tell me that to be good salespeople, they've got to be good talkers. I totally disagree. To be good salespeople, you have to be good listeners. And then you can actually find what the client wants by listening to their needs and fulfilling their needs. So empathetic listening, listening with intent to understand. Professionals need to understand the needs, concerns, and situation before recommending a course of action. This requires empathetic listening. So there are 4 levels of competencies. We can mimic content, we can rephrase content, we can reflect the feeling, and we can rephrase the content and reflect the feeling. So this is actually then, you can show that you're being empathetic and listening carefully by mimicking what they say. So copying the kind of content that they're talking about, rephrasing the content. So actually saying to him, so what you mean by that is this. So you're actually rephrasing what you're saying to show that you've really, or that you really want to understand. And sometimes you haven't, and they say, no, I didn't actually mean that. I meant this. Somebody did that last week. I'd made a statement and somebody said, well, what about this? And oh yeah, you're right. What I actually meant to say was this. So rephrasing content is really important, but you can reflect the feeling in this and rephrase content and reflect the feeling in by the way that you speak, by the body language that you use, the tones that you use, and the caring that you're able to demonstrate. So we've got receiving, understanding, remembering, evaluating what people tell us, what do they mean by that, and then responding. So there's a lot to listening. It isn't just a case of hearing what somebody says and replying before they even finish speaking, which people often do. I have some people who finish my sentences, which drives me absolutely crazy, because quite often they're not saying what I was going to say. They're saying something totally different. And then do I correct them and do I say, actually, I didn't mean to say that, I was saying this, or do I just sort of shrug my shoulders and give up? Because if they couldn't be bothered listening to me, why should I care? Explain to them what I really meant. So 10 Covey rules for listening. Concentrating on what the speaker has to say. Listen for content and emotion to understand the entire message. What are they actually feeling when they're telling you this? Are they upset? Are they happy? What? Maintain steady eye contact so that they know your attention is with them. Reflect back with verbal feedback to confirm your understanding, using the words, phrases, and feelings that they're using. Be patient when people are talking with you. Don't get frustrated. Keep your tone sincere and non-judgmental when you listen. Give feedback to check understanding in 1 sentence. So that we're not giving copious feedback. We're making our feedback punchy. Tune into how the message is being said, not just what the words are. Acknowledge that feelings are important to the message you're hearing. And make your goal in conversation to show understanding of what the speaker truly means. 10 communication pitfalls. Using emails to express concerns. Using too much talking in sales situations. Responding to requests immediately by saying it can't be done, rather than thinking, how could this be done? Providing employees with opinionated criticism of performance, or indeed customers' opinionated criticism. Saying yes when you really don't mean it. You can actually tell when people don't mean something. When you say, would you like to come with me next week to this event, or do you want to come out for dinner tomorrow night? You can actually tell the people who are going to who say yes, but are actually going to phone back later and say, actually, I can't make it. Sitting passively when people discuss issues with you, rather than showing active body language. We'll talk about body language in a few minutes. Focusing on what is wrong or who is at fault with problem situations, rather than focusing on what can be done. So just say that one again, it's important. Focusing on what is wrong or who is at fault. Oh, this isn't my fault, or they're to blame, rather than thinking, oh, this is a problem that needs to be solved. Focusing on yourself, your likes and dislikes when receiving messages. Attempting to soften a point when addressing tough or sensitive issues. And pushing forward with your idea and disregarding concerns people might have with it. Incredibly important. Demonstrate empathy. Actively listen. Seek to truly understand others before you attempt to make your own point. Okay, so I promise to come back to listening because it's important, but under communication skills, we're going to be talking about that next. I've got some nice videos about it, which we can talk about briefly in a little while. But synergize, what does this mean? Synergy is when people are working together. Stephen Covey says, when leaders fundamentally don't believe people can be trusted, they create a system and structures that reflect that belief, such as hierarchy, that reflect that belief, such as hierarchy, multiple layers of management, and cumbersome processes. Synergy occurs when the whole is greater than the sum of parts. Just think about, for example, when you're asked to brainstorm, lots of people have an idea. So a question is asked in a classroom, and you brainstorm, and the teacher stands at the front, or the leader stands at the front and writes on the flip chart. How often does it happen to you that you've thought of 4 or 5 things, and people say 4 or 5 things, but then the others, those things, or you might have said them first, but then other people say things, and you think, gosh, yeah, that's really good. I never thought about that. And different people have different points of view, different experiences, different things that they need to say. And by the time you get to the end of the discussion, your list of 4 points could become 15 or 20 points. But then a magical thing happens sometimes, because the reflectors, the people who are thinking deeply about what's being said, often think of the magic idea. Based on those other ideas, they sometimes think of the killer idea, just because, not because they had that idea initially, but because these other ideas gave them the opportunity to think in a different way, to think outside their own box. And sometimes you might get 3 or 4 synergized ideas that come from different people, which were better than the sum of the parts. So that's ideal brainstorming. It's a great example of synergy. And what I'll repeat it again, it occurs when the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So you can find and use the magic of teamwork doing that. Synergy is not the same as compromise. In compromise, 1 + 1 equals 1.5 at the best. Synergy is better than my way or your way. It's our way. It's this better way. Rather than compromise, oh, we'll do a bit of your idea, we'll do a bit of my idea. Let's make this work using the best of all of our ideas. Again, this is something that Stephen Covey says. And finally, Sharpening the saw. Sharpening the saw is looking after yourself. It's renewing yourself. It's taking care of yourself. So it's about your physical well-being. It's about your social and emotional well-being. It's about your spiritual well-being. It's about your mental well-being. So physical, do you look after exercise? Do you pay attention to nutrition? Do you try and manage stressful situations? In social and emotional situations, do you think about service? Do you think about empathy? Are you looking to synergize? Are you thinking about intrinsic security, the security of us all, these things that can't be touched? It's about your spiritual things. I know some of you will go to church, but not all of you will, but we can, even those of you who don't go to church can still think about our spiritual selves, our inner selves, our values. Have you clarified your values? Have you clarified your commitment? Do you study? Do you meditate? Do you think about things deeply? Do you give yourself time to do those things? And then finally, your mental well-being. Do you read things, perhaps helpful books, perhaps books for entertainment, for enjoyment, for just satisfaction? Do you visualize things? Do you plan things? Do you write things down when you plan things? Visualization is an amazing thing to use when you're thinking about your goals and achieving your goals. Visualize what you want to achieve. It makes it easier to achieve it if you've actually visualized how it would look, how it would feel, and how it would sound to achieve that thing. So sharpening the saw is all about preventative maintenance and self-renewal. Effectiveness, your personal effectiveness, lies in the delicate balance between production and production capability. So sure, we should be producing, but we should be capable of producing also. David got himself, when I told you about Dave earlier, he got himself into such a level of stress that he actually wasn't capable of producing effectively anymore because he was so stressed. And he needed to sharpen his saw again and to look at things in a different way. So sharpening the saw is actually trying to think of new things rather than plodding ahead because you're too busy operating this in the same old way. Continually seek self-improvement. I think I said to you last week that even at my age, I guess I'm 2 or 3 years older than you, I still honestly and truthfully believe in self-improvement, lifelong learning. I really do. So let's just stop for a few moments. We've now talked about personal skills. We've talked about the 7 habits of highly effective people. Let's bring up people's faces again. Where have you all gone? Zoom I want. Here we go. Okay, everybody. So I'm pleased to see that you're all still with me. What do you think about Stephen Covey's 7 habits? Is there something in there that you could, that you knew already, or perhaps I've reminded you of, or perhaps something you think, gosh, I should do some of those things?
I think they're interesting. Some things that I resolved in my mind to do at the start of the year in terms of the urgency versus important. It was interesting when I saw it's like, okay, that's what I've been trying to do, focus on what's important and not necessarily keep thinking, okay, have that pressure of I have to do this now, I have to do this now. So it was interesting to see how he has these habits and you do sort of these things in your normal life, but the way he has it broken down, it's just interesting to see how you can relate it.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for that, Nikita. That's a very nice reflection. Anybody else? Okay. Would you say that when you're dealing with people that you operate in a win-win situation?
I try,
Okay.
but I think I'm more so, I'm willing more. So I think sometimes I'm more so willing to compromise than the other person.
Okay. Well, win-win isn't necessarily compromise. Win-win is finding the win solution for us both, really. I know what you're saying. It's a step towards win-win compromise. I guess one of the issues is that some of the people we're dealing with don't necessarily want to have win-win. They want to have win-lose in their favor. And part of what we need to do is try and say to people, what I'm trying to find is a solution where we both win, rather than have a win-lose situation. I certainly don't want to be in a situation where I win and you lose. But what I would really like to do is find a solution where we both win. And that's something that I've actually said to people in the past in that situation. And it's quite interesting how people stop and think about that quite often. Not always. I can't say that it happened every time I said it, but quite often people were quite thoughtful at that moment when I said that. And okay, maybe this guy is going to show integrity. Maybe he's not going to try and rip me off. Maybe he is actually going to seek a solution that's going to be good for both of us. So I think you can actually use some of these phrases sometimes and to demonstrate strong relationship skills. Okay. I've got a couple of videos in the next session, so it won't be all me talking, but we've actually reached half time. Just before we move on, I'm really glad that you were able to say something, Nikita. Anybody else want to say anything about Covey 7 habits before I move on? Any kind of feelings about it? Any disagreements, for example? You might say, actually, I didn't agree with some of those things in there. Quite happy to hear that. Okay, fair enough. Let's move on. Okay, so the communication process. We need to be able to communicate with people. There should be some sound to this. I've clicked the sound earlier, but sometimes it goes off again when the recording's happening. So just please tell me if you don't hear the sound.
The 3 V's of communication. We are constantly communicating, even when we are not speaking. If we want our message to be well received, we convey our message so our words align with our body language. The 3 V's of communication look like this. Visual, 55% impact. Body language, facial expressions, gestures, appearance. Vocal, 38% impact. Tonality, pace of delivery, volume, pausing, clarity. Verbal, 7% impact. Language, words, terminology, concise. These percentages do not mean the words aren't important, but demonstrate that people are impacted by our body language more so than our words if what they see and feel are not aligned with what they are hearing. For example, if you say, "I really care about my patients," but the delivery lacks any emotion, while our body language shows a lack of interest. Looking at the floor, writing while you're speaking, no smile. Patients are less likely to believe what you are saying. However, if you match your vocal tone and reflection with appropriate eye contact and posture while smiling, the whole feeling changes. It's not just what you say, but how you say it. Remembering the 3 V's while interacting with patients, visitors, team members, and other social interactions ensures your message is well received.
I quite like that. It's quite interesting, and and it's brief, and it's to the point. But just think about this for a second. The words that we use probably create 7% impact, something like that. Yeah. Just think about every time you send an email or a text. How many times when you sent a text, which is very, very abbreviated words quite often, you're not even using full words in that. In an email, at least you're usually using full words. But in a text, how many times do people misunderstand what you say? It's because there's no tonality, there's no body language. So people get often the wrong idea of what you meant in a text, because only the words, they only receive the words from you rather than the emotion behind it, what you actually meant. You're only joking, or you weren't being serious when you said a particular thing. So it's really important to remember not just to be careful about the words that we use, but also how we say them in terms of our appearance, our visual aspects, but also our vocal aspects, our tonality, and the way that we're speaking. So using this, thinking about meeting and greeting, what could we do, or what do we say? What about the greeting that we use? What about the language and the words? When you do meet people, say it and mean it. We're talking about the words, the music, and the dance. The words are the way we say it. The music is how we say it. When we say music, we refer to the way how we say it. This includes the tone of your voice, the volume of your voice, how fast you speak, the rhythm of your voice, and which words you emphasize. The dance, how you look when you're talking. Do you look happy? Do you look sad? Do you look angry? Do you look officious? How do you look when you're talking? The dance, think about the effects that the following might have when we're talking to customers. Making gestures with our hands or arms, pacing while we talk, smiling, raising eyebrows, general body language. Is it open or closed? I'll come back to body language and open and closed in a moment. So interacting with your customers. First thing, think positively. Think positively. I'm going to have a positive outcome from this. Try and use positive words as opposed to negative words. We can't do that. We might be forced to do that. Behave positively. Let's see how we can help you. And aim for a positive outcome. That's what I was always trying to do with customers, aiming for a positive outcome. So, thinking about this, what type of questions do you ask? And here we're talking about open questions and closed questions. So tell me, what are open questions? Can anybody tell me?
Open questions are questions that you ask, not expecting or given the avenue for an exact response, like what we call an open-ended question. So instead of having the person respond by saying simply yes or no, you leave room for an explanation or an excuse.
That's great, thank you. That's exactly right. So closed questions often gets simply yes or no. Are you happy? Yes or no. Are you sad? Yes or no. Are you bored? Yes or no. Are you sleepy because Mike Hill got you up early this morning? Yes or no. All of those, did you notice, began with a verb. On the other hand, open questions, it's very difficult if I ask an open question to give a yes or no answer. And again, thinking back to the times that I watched the guys that I was coaching, I used to just notice how often they asked open and closed questions. And I used to do this sometimes when people were really bad at it. There'd be 5 open questions, sorry, 5 closed questions to 1 open question. 5 closed questions to 1 open question. 5 closed questions to one open question. Then at the end of the discussion, they'd say, oh, gosh, it was so difficult to get any information from that client. And it was because they were asking closed questions. So this is something that I was told several times on a course, on different courses. And then when I learned about Stephen Covey, I thought about open questions again. And I actually developed a habit, which was to ask open questions. So can anybody tell me what the main open questions are? Because they actually begin with a word, the main open questions. Anybody know what they are?
Hi, Mike. I want to give a stab at it. What about how? Asking them how?
I guess exactly good. Any more? There's actually 7.
Like, how can we help you, or how can we serve you? What can we do?
Okay, what is a different one?
Yes, what?
Any more, anybody?
When?
Great. That was exactly, I was just about to start writing it then when you said it. So that was fantastic. Perfect timing. When?
Where?
Exactly.
Who?
I was actually writing that. Who?
Why?
Which? Why?
Exactly. Be careful with why, because sometimes the teacher or your mum might have said, why did you do that? And why can sometimes be perceived as a criticism. So try and avoid why if you can, but it is actually an open question. But it's very difficult to say, what are you feeling now? No, yes. When are you going to do that? Yes, no. Where are you going to do that? Yes, no. Yes, no doesn't work. So these are all open questions and work really well. And actually practicing, when I was developing this habit, I actually realized several times that I was intending to ask an open question because I wasn't starting with one of these words. So I actually stopped mid-sentence initially and started to rephrase my sentence so that I was using one of these words. But then I also learned about 3 other words which are actually even more open than these words. I'll just put H and 6 W's on here. Dave once told me this is like 6 fat men sitting on a wall. It's 6 W's. So these 6 men are sitting on a wall. The H. 6 W's and an H. How, what, when, where, who, which, and why. But Ted, these are actually even more open. And one of these is my favorite question when I'm starting a conversation with a new customer. T, E, D. Tell, explain, describe. Tell me about your business. Tell me about yourself. Not which job did you do? Where did you go to school? Those are open questions, but tell me about yourself is so open. And you can even narrow it down. Tell me about work today, or tell me about your day. But it still is a very, very open question. And what you can do is literally a filtering process. You can start with some open questions, then filter. What do you mean by that? Where did you do that? Who did that? And then confirm understanding by asking a closed question. So just let me understand. Did you say you did this? Yes or no? We've got clarification of a point. So I've demonstrated by asking a closed question that I've been listening carefully. So really important that we use open questions. If you don't already do it, I strongly, strongly recommend that you actually actively plan to do this as a habit. if you work on it, it will take you 20 days maximum to develop this as a habit and to start asking open questions when you want to ask an open question, rather than always starting with closed questions, or usually asking with closed questions. But something else you should be careful about. Sorry, before I move on, everybody happy with that as a demonstration?
Yes.
I wonder how many times you actually use, if you think about it, how many times you actually use these questions when you're talking to a client. These questions, better still, as opposed to these questions. Would you be like the people who used to work for me down here, or would you actually be somebody who's asking lots and lots of questions? I just wonder. This is a time for self-evaluation. But going back to this now, try and be careful with multiple questions. You quite often hear television interviewers asking multiple questions. Multiple questions, they ask 3 times. So what about the economy? What do you think is going to happen in the future? What do you think is happening with this? And when they so often ask 3 questions, and have you ever noticed what happens when people ask multiple questions? People tend to answer the last one, and they skip the other 2. So if you really wanted to know what somebody thought about the economy or whatever else it was, try and avoid asking multiple questions. Ask 1 question at a time, and be prepared to dig deeper, because the first answer you're given isn't necessarily the answer, the complete answer. You quite often find, if you dig a little bit more, what did you mean by that? Or dig a little bit deeper, that you'll find there's more to be gained by that. Leading questions is where you're actually trying to lead somebody to give you a particular answer. And I don't think that's a particularly helpful way of doing it. So sometimes people ask a leading question. You see it in court cases a lot. If you've ever watched counsel for the defense, they will ask leading questions, leading the witness into a particular statement, expecting them to say yes, when really you can see from the jury members, sorry, not the jury member, the witness's expression that they wanted to say something totally different. So try and avoid using that when we're trying to build a strong relationship with people. So what we're looking for is excellent verbal communication skills. We're looking for excellent non-verbal communication skills, and we're looking for excellent listening skills. So we're aiming for a productive relationship with our customers. So communicating positively, plan your messages, greet customers warmly and sincerely, be specific. Use small talk. It's okay to use small talk sometimes. It helps to build a good feeling when you're talking to people at the very beginning. Use simple language. Don't try and impress people with words that only you know. And paraphrase. Definitely paraphrase when people are saying things to you. Try and communicate positively. Ask positively questions. Instead of why do you feel that way, what makes you feel that way? Again, why is quite often a negative question. Instead of why do you want that colour, what other colours have you considered? Communicate to your customers' style. Agree with customers if you possibly can do. So actually follow their lead if you can do. And we actually say mirroring and matching. If you want to get in harmony with a client, try and subtly mirror their body position, the kind of tones that they're using, and the kind of words that they're using. But ask for feedback as well, and ask for participation. I just did that rather unsuccessfully a few minutes ago. I was asking for feedback and I got one person's feedback rather than 10 people's feedback. But perhaps I should improve my questioning skills also. Communicating positively. Phrases that build a relationship. Please, thank you. I can, I will. How may I help? I understand how you feel, if you actually do. Yes, you're right. May I? Would you mind? I apologize for. Words and phrases that damage relationships. You don't understand what I'm saying. You don't see my point of view. Hold on a second. Our policy says no or prohibits. Our policy prohibits. Really bad phrase to use. That's not my responsibility. What you need to do is this. Why don't you? Using the word problem, using the word but, and using the word no. Try and avoiding those things if you possibly can do. So the 6 C's of giving good information to customers: be clear, be concise, be correct, be complete, be courteous, and give concrete statements, reliable statements. So gather your thoughts, choose your words, be careful with your voice modulation, be careful with your body language, listen, concentrate, use eye contact, that shows that you're listening, use postures to show interest in what people are saying. As I say, use simple or familiar language and use effective questioning skills. So just thinking about non-verbal communication for a few minutes. I want to talk about this for a bit. Is this person listening here being defensive with his arms folded, leaning backwards when somebody's saying something to them? Is this person leaning backwards with his arms like this, looking arrogant? This person's leaning forward, but with a different expression, looking annoyed, looking irritated, looking happy, looking confused, looking worried. Lots and lots of verbal, non-verbal communication from people's appearance. What verbal communication are you giving when you're talking to people? Are you aware of it? Are you thinking about it? Are you managing it? Another thing with personal non-verbal communication is space. Are you a space invader? Do you get very close to people? That's the intimate space. Around about 1.5 feet or 45 centimeters. Or the personal space. Do you invade people's personal space up to about 4 foot or 1.2 meters? Are you occupying social space, 12 feet or 3.7 meters? Or from the speaker, are you in the public space, which is 25 feet away or 7.6? I have to say, you've got to be very careful when you're getting to know people, not to be a space invader, not to get too close to people too soon. Intimate spaces where you really do know these people very well. They're happy to see you. Boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, if you're in good relationship with your husband or your wife when you boyfriend or girlfriend. Be very, very careful to go so close to people that you've only just met. There genuinely are people that are space invaders. Try not to be a space invader. That's one of the first computer games. I don't know if you remember it, those of you who are old enough. Space invader means computer games, but it also means invading people's personal space. But non-verbal communication is your body language, the volume or the cues that you give, the appearance or the grooming, and other cues. So I want to show a video. It's quite a long video, and I don't want to show it all because it's too long, actually. But I'm giving you the links for it because I'll give you the first 3 or 4 minutes, and if you're interested, you can go back and get this link and watch it yourself. So let's move on to the next one. It's quite a long one. I can't remember exactly how long it is, but it's too long for us to show in its entirety today, I think.
How to read anyone instantly. Improvement pill here. In this video, we're going to cover one of the most important skills you can add to your arsenal. The ability to read anyone in any situation by looking at their body language. Because although we humans have been using verbal communication for thousands of years, our most transparent form of communication is still body language. People can hide their true intentions easily with words, but it's extremely difficult for them to do so with their body. A study conducted by MIT found that it was possible to predict the outcomes of negotiations, sales meetings, and business plan pitches with 87% accuracy by only observing the participants' body language without having to listen to a single word of content. By improving your ability to read body language, you will understand how anyone feels at any point in time. This is an extremely powerful skill as it allows you to make more friends, make more sales, figure out who likes you, figure out who doesn't, and even use these skills on yourself to display more confidence and authority. It's almost as good as having the superpower to read minds. In the first half of this video, you're going to learn how to spot the different forms of body language and what they mean. In the second half, you're going to learn about the 4 rules you have to keep in mind in order to read someone accurately. This is equally, if not more so important, because simply looking at signs is not enough to make an accurate conclusion. As you watch this video, I'd highly suggest you to act out each of these body language signs, because this will help you understand exactly what the particular sign is, what it feels like, and it'll improve your ability to recognize it in others. We'll start with the easiest part of the body to read, your legs and feet. They are considered to be the most honest part of the body, and this is because the feet are usually the first part of the body to react to a change in your environment. On top of that, people who are lying or trying to conceal their real emotions tend to focus on their face and hands, but put little to no effort into changing the way their feet are situated. Happy feet. This is when you bounce or wiggle your feet, and this often indicates excitement or satisfaction. However, this behavior can also communicate impatience. There are many body language signs like this that can mean different things depending on the context around them, and we'll discuss this concept in detail in the second half of this video. Lifted feet. This is when the toes on your feet are pointing upwards while standing, or when one of your heels is lifted while standing, and this usually indicates happiness, excitement, and interest. Feet shifting direction. We turn our feet away from things we don't want or like. People can manually control the direction of their head and torso, but most of the time their feet will point away if they don't want to be there. If you are already talking to someone and their feet suddenly turns away, it might indicate that they dislike something you have just said. But don't take this sign too personally, as there's many cases in which they simply have somewhere to be, such as an appointment or a lunch date. The knee clasp. This is when someone who is sitting places both their hands on their knees and shifts their body forward. This is an indicator that they are ready to leave. How wide of a stance you have while standing is a good indicator of confidence. Someone who is standing with their feet shoulder width apart feels and looks more confident than someone who stands with their feet close together. A general rule of thumb to note when reading body language is that the more space someone takes up, the more confident they are. This concept also applies while sitting. Sitting with your legs apart is a good indicator of confidence and comfort. The standing leg cross. This is when you are standing with your legs crossed, and this indicates that you are extremely comfortable. And this is because by crossing your feet, you'll have a much harder time running away from a threat. This body language sign is a great way to help people around you relax. You'll also find that people will usually cross their legs so they tilt in the direction of the person they like the most, or whoever makes them feel the most comfortable. Shoe play. This is when someone plays with their shoe, such as dangling it or balancing it on their feet. This sign is a flirtatious sign that is used to attract the attention of potential mates. The seated leg cross. This is when you're sitting and you have one foot on top of your thigh. This causes your other thigh to form a barrier and has different meanings depending on which direction this barrier is facing. When someone has their thigh between you and them, it usually indicates that they are not comfortable with you or dislike something you have just said. On the other hand, if the barrier is not between you and them, facing the other way, it means the opposite. They feel comfortable with you and they like what you said. Proximity. Everyone has a personal space circle around them, an imaginary circle in which they are most comfortable speaking with strangers. If somebody likes you, they will allow you to move further into their circle, and they will also try to move closer into yours. The foot freeze. This is when a person has been moving their feet or legs a lot and then suddenly stops. And this usually means that they are experiencing some sort of stress or another powerful emotion. The foot lock. This is when someone who had their legs apart suddenly crosses their feet while sitting, and this is usually a sign of discomfort and or stress. Sometimes people will even do this with the legs of the chair they are sitting on. The next part of your body we're going to focus on is your torso. The torso contains many of the body's vital organs, so your brain will do whatever is necessary to protect this area. And this leads to a ton of very apparent body language signs that you can look out for. The front of the torso. The front side of your body is the most sensitive side, so you will unconsciously shift your torso away from anything that is considered a threat. This doesn't even have to apply in dangerous situations such as a mugging, but also for people you don't like and even topics you don't like. You'll also find that you will shift your torso towards things and people you do like. A good trick to use in an interaction is to face the person you are speaking with. This shows that you are interested in them and the conversation that the two of you are having. Shielding your torso. This covers a variety of signs. Anything that involves the covering of your torso falls under this category. This includes body language signs such as crossing your arms, playing with the bracelet or watch on your other hand, and even holding a book or bag up to your chest. These signs usually indicate a feeling of discomfort or nervousness. Again, it's important to note that these body language signs are not absolute indicators by themselves. Some people are simply comfortable doing things like crossing their arms, which is why you have to look at the context surrounding this body language to make an accurate conclusion.
Okay, so
How to read.
So as I say, I don't want to show the whole video because I think it's about 15 minutes long, but there's a few examples here. We've got this turtle expression here, where the shoulders are above his chin. This turtle effect often gives a sign of weakness or negative insecurity. He's already mentioned the feet turning away, an intention to leave. Crossing of arms can be discomfort or defensive. This is a regal stance. You used to see Trump do this a lot, particularly when he was meeting foreign dignitaries, those kind of things. So this is a don't come close to me. This is I'm in charge here. Also, look, legs wide. I'm in control. Arms and legs akimbo. Toe pointing upwards. He mentioned this. Good move, positive. If you're leaning away from somebody, you could be uncomfortable with them or disagree with them. Foot pointing away. He's already said intention to leave. Crossing legs often indicates comfort because it's more difficult for me to run away. That was mentioned in the video. Thumbs back, hidden behind the body, tends to be I'm in control. However, thumbs where you can see them is a less authoritative stance. Can you see how subtle things like this can make a big difference? So just where your thumbs are can show something about you if you're not careful. And maybe you don't actually feel that way, but this is perhaps how people will be viewing you. Crossing legs, we've got this starter's position again with intention to leave. So lots and lots of different things that might be indicators. And the video talks a lot more about that. It's I think it's a fascinating subject, and it's something that you could actually spend a day with this. But body language is about eye contact, it's about posture, it's about your facial expression, it's about your gestures. We've got the volume cues, which is the pitch of your voice, the volume, the rate of your speech, how are you speaking quickly or slowly, the quality of your voice, do you sound bored or happy, your articulation, how are you pronouncing the words. What about pauses? Pauses usually indicate either not actually understanding what you're talking about or possibly confidence. So be careful about using pauses. And silence. Silence is an amazing thing. Sometimes when I've asked a sales question, I can wait 2 minutes for people to reply because I can see that they're thinking. And when I used to teach people to sell, I taught them about the sales process. But I often used to say, when you ask this question, people are going to be thinking about what you've just said. do not be tempted to say something to help them out. Give them time to think. And there was one particular situation where I said that to one of the people that was working for me, and the client waited at least 2 minutes before he gave an answer. But when he gave the answer, it was exactly what we wanted him to say, because he'd been saying for months and months and months that he wanted a particular product, but then wouldn't sign the form. And this guy had said to me, how do I get somebody who keeps saying that they want something, but then won't actually sign the form? How do I get them to sign? And I actually demonstrated a sales process to him with a client. And I told him in advance not to say anything when I asked a particular question. And 2 minutes or so later, the client actually told us, yes, I really should go ahead with this. So it's really interesting. Sometimes even a 10-second pause is a long time. That was approximately 10 seconds. Just imagine what 2 minutes is like. But sometimes you have to wait and give them time to think when you've asked a telling question. Your appearance and your grooming, hygiene, all of this other stuff. Hopefully I don't need to even say this really. Then miscellaneous cues, your personal habits, your etiquette, and the manners that you demonstrate during any kind of meeting. So again, some more nonverbal communication. This is really interesting. This is about the way that men and women communicate. This is by a lady called Deborah Tannen. And I actually do a talk on managing people, women and men. But this is just a short clip from a Deborah Tannen video, which is quite interesting. It's a little bit old, but I've never found anything better to show. So you might see some old hairstyles, and it's interesting that we can be impacted by actual appearance, even though she's a professor of I think it's Washington State University. You can possibly be put off when she's talking simply because of her appearance, which is a little bit out of date now. But what she's saying is really interesting. So try and get over her hairdo and listen to what she's saying.
I first observed this pattern in nonverbal communication in a study I did of how children sat when they talked to their best friends. I gave the children chairs. The 5-year-old girls placed the chairs parallel, but then twisted around to face each other directly. The 5-year-old boys sat side by side and looked around the room. Here are 10-year-old girls looking right at each other, while the 10-year-old boys sit parallel and avoid direct eye contact. I found the same with the 15-year-old girls looking straight at each other and the 15-year-old boys also sitting at angles, avoiding eye contact. I couldn't believe when I went into the workplace and saw adults, women and men, following the same pattern. This direct face-to-face gaze that you see among women is another way of focusing on the connection when they're talking to each other. And for that reason, when men don't look directly at them, women may accuse them of not listening, when in fact they are. Because this direct face-to-face gaze is not a ritual that many men are used to, they will often perceive a direct face-to-face gaze from another man as some kind of a challenge, and a direct locking gaze from a woman may even seem to them as flirtation. At this meeting at Good Housekeeping magazine in New York City, you can see that the woman all the way at the end of the table on the left cranes her neck in order to create that direct gaze to show that she's listening. The man in the middle is just looking straight ahead. You can see that these are two different ways of showing that you're listening. In a sense, they're different rituals, something that you've learned over time and then you begin to do automatically without questioning it. It just seems the way to do it. Just as we have these different rituals for listening, we have different rituals for speaking.
So, as I say, I've got lots and lots of videos from Deborah Tannen, and I wish that I'd seen this years ago, I could have had a much different relationship with a lot of the women in my life, because I've tried to moderate some of those behaviors and become a better communicator with the opposite sex. And but I think I'll be very surprised if you don't recognize those behaviors in people that that you're working with. I can remember the first time I was introduced to this, it was by a very interesting lady who focused, specialized in this particular area, and she introduced me to these videos. And I was working in Istanbul with her on a training course, and we actually did, we used some of these videos, but then I think I traveled back on the Friday night. On the Saturday, I went out with our neighbors. My wife and I went out with our neighbors. It was really interesting because the guy was talking to me, and he was doing exactly that. He was literally looking forward, and the two women were turned round to each other and facing each other. So it was so true, and it was so what had been happening on the videos. Very, very interesting. There's quite a lot of stuff that you can download about Deborah Tannen, Tannen, if you're interested in hers. But I think it's possible to download one of her papers, but some very interesting things in there. And you can actually see some of the speeches that she makes, not quite the videos which I've just shown you, but elements of the videos which I have on the YouTube as well. So positive communication behavior, as I say, brief eye contact, eyes wide open, smiling, nodding affirmatively, expressive body gestures, listening actively, remaining silent, as the customer speaks, that's a bullet point that's got mixed up, gesturing with open hands, and clean, organized work area. Negative communication behavior, yawning, frowning or sneering, no eye contact, a negative posture with your arms folded, leaning back, thinking about other things like that guy was doing with the moustache and the glasses in the meeting. A passive expression or gesture, leaning away from customers as they speak, subdued or minimal hand gestures, staring blankly or coolly at customers, not smiling, not nodding, not frowning, not smiling, interrupting when people are talking, pointing a finger or object at a customer, disorganized, cluttered workspace, negative communication behavior. So always listen first. Seek first to understand, then be understood. Empathy, understanding, patientness, attentiveness, objectivity. Strategies for improved listening. Stop talking. Prepare yourself. Listen actively. Show willingness to listen. Show empathy. Send positive nonverbal clues. Don't argue, and ask questions. So some more listening skills.
Listening is one of the most important aspects of effective communication. In today's high-tech, high-speed world, we seem to devote less and less time to really listening to one another. Genuine listening is a skill, and it's a really powerful tool you can use in the workplace. By improving your listening skills, you can make a speaker feel heard and understood. This helps build stronger, deeper connections between you and your colleagues. A good listener creates a workplace environment where everyone feels safe to express ideas, opinions, and feelings. They can creatively solve problems in partnership, and they can save time, avoiding conflict and misunderstandings. They can also help relieve negative emotions. When a person feels that he or she has been truly heard, it can help calm them and allow for understanding or problem solving to begin. There are 4 key skills which you can learn to unlock the power of effective listening. Number 1, focus fully on the speaker. You need to really concentrate on the person speaking and pay special attention to their body language and other non-verbal cues. If you start to daydream, doodle, or check social media, then you're certain to miss non-verbal cues in the conversation. Okay, some speakers can be really, really boring. So if you're finding it hard to concentrate, try repeating their words over in your head. It will reinforce their message and help you stay focused. Number 2, avoid interrupting. It's very common for people to interrupt one another when communicating. Have you ever been speaking with a colleague or manager and it seems no matter what you do, you keep getting interrupted? You begin a sentence, then suddenly someone jumps in to complete it. It's very frustrating, isn't it? You feel like you're not being heard. If it happens often enough, you might even stop contributing to the conversation altogether. Furthermore, you decide the person interrupting you is rude and your relationship is damaged forever. So, why do people do it? Well, on average, humans speak at a rate of 125 to 150 words per minute. But the human brain can comprehend and listen at the rate of 600 words per minute. This means that our minds are underutilized when listening to others. We therefore struggle to keep our minds on topic. You might hear one or two phrases of the conversation and jump ahead to a solution or share a previous experience. Our boredom can inadvertently create a separate conversation. There are simple tricks you can practice to interrupt your interrupting behavior. For example, try to close your mouth whilst listening. People often open their mouths to signal to the other person that they are ready to talk. When in a conversation, imagine a drop of glue on your lip. Focusing on keeping your mouth closed will stop you interrupting someone. Another tip is to make a note during the conversation. We now know that our brains operate much faster than others can speak, so it's natural that we have ideas we don't want to lose, and this can lead you to interrupt someone. To combat this urge and avoid losing the idea, write it down. Continue to listen, but make a note of the points you want to make when it's your turn to talk. Finally, try to change your focus. Think about listening more than talking. Simply change your goal for the conversation to listen more than you speak. This change in focus can have a drastic impact on your success in curbing your interruption habit. Chances are one of the points we just covered speaks to you directly. Focus on that method and use it in your very next conversation. Number 3, avoid seeming judgmental. In order to communicate effectively with someone, you don't have to like them or agree with their ideas, values, or opinions. However, you do need to set aside your judgment and withhold blame and criticism in order to fully understand a person. The most difficult communication, when successfully executed, can lead to the most unlikely and profound connection with someone. Number 4, show your interest. You need to look interested in what the other person is saying. Try to nod occasionally, smile at the person talking, and make sure your posture is open and inviting. Encourage the speaker to continue with small verbal comments like yes, right, and really. You can even show you are listening with non-words such as or uh-huh. If your goal is to fully understand and connect with the other person, then listening effectively will often come naturally. If it doesn't, you can remember the 4 key skills you've just learned. The more you practice them, the more satisfying and rewarding your interactions with others will become.
Okay, I hope you don't mind me showing these videos like this. I hope you're finding them interesting. In particular, that video, I would, if I was in a classroom, I would be demonstrating those behaviors, sitting down, standing up, nodding, falling asleep, doing all those other kind of things. But it's very difficult to do that over the Zoom like this. So I'm using videos more than I probably would do in a classroom to get over some messages. So I hope that it's being effective and that you're comfortable with that. I'm going to ask for your feedback before we finish in 5 minutes time. So I'll actually give you the opportunity to answer that particular question. So as I say, attend physically. The right body language helps us to focus on the customer and encourages the customer to give more information. Attend mentally. Follow the customer's flow of thought. Listen to understand, not to evaluate. Listen first and then assess. This is exactly Stephen Covey, isn't it? Seek first to understand, then be understood. Make sure you fully understand before you try and make somebody understand something that you want to say. Check verbally, paraphrase, clarify, probe further, summarize your understanding are all really good listening techniques. And again, finally, telephone handling. Answering the telephone professionally. Answer the phone within 4 rings. Use the 4 answering courtesies. Greet the caller, state your organization or department, introduce yourself and offer to help. Show enthusiasm, make the caller feel welcome. Use friendly phrases as part of your greeting. Thanks for calling, may I help you? Remember to smile as you pick up your receiver. If you smile, you can actually, that comes out in your body language, even over the telephone. And remember, the telephone, you're still only receiving the vocal and the verbal. You're not getting the visual body language on a telephone. So you're still missing a lot of the communication using a telephone. Face-to-face is always best. But remember, if you're on the phone, you're missing out on part of the communication piece, and that's hindering your communication with your clients or with whoever you're talking to. Closing the conversation. Thank the caller. Let the caller know you appreciate their business. Provide assurance that any promise will be fulfilled. How many times has somebody said they'll do something and then they fail to do it? And how do you feel about those people when they do that? Leave the caller with a positive feeling. Some courteous closing statements such as, thanks for calling, we appreciate your business. I'm glad we're able to help you. Goodbye and thanks for calling. I enjoyed talking with you. If you have any additional questions, please call me. What do you do when you put people on hold? Do you ask them if you can put them on hold? Do you tell them how long they'll be on hold, 1 or 2 minutes? Do you assure them that you'll be working for them while they're on hold? Tell them what you'll be doing while you're away from the phone? How do you feel when you're phoning up an organization and they put on that music and say, I'm just going to put you on hold? How do you feel about it? Usually, I have to say, I'd much rather hear them rustling paper in the background than putting me on more music again. And particularly when they're away for several minutes, but I feel less bad if they tell me some of this stuff. So the final video before we finish, just a little bit of telephone etiquette, and then we're going to stop after this video.
The need for phone etiquette. First impressions. It takes less than 3 seconds to make your first impression. Are you making a good one with how you answer the phone? In the next few minutes, we're going to share some ways to transform your caller experience and deliver the best possible first impression. Transforming your caller's experience. Answer promptly before the 3rd ring. When your phone rings, someone has made the effort to reach out to your company. Answer the call promptly with an attitude that shows you care that they called. Your attitude will be reflected in the tone of voice you use. Before picking up the receiver, discontinue any other conversations or activity that could be heard by the calling party. Callers are put off by hearing the tail end of your conversation or loud noises as you pick up the phone. The ringing phone is a sign that you're about to interact with a potential client. Use a succinct greeting. Make sure your caller knows the company they've reached and your name. And remember, if you make a good impression now, you'll have time to tell them all the other things you offer later. Don't try to cram them all into the first greeting. If the caller accidentally reached you instead of someone else at your company, be courteous and helpful. Sometimes they've been transferred all over the company with a simple question. If possible, attempt to find out where they should call or to whom they need to speak. They will greatly appreciate it. If you can solve their issue or answer their question, even if it's not your normal job, you've just won a customer for life. Learning to listen. It starts with listening. Listening carefully promotes outstanding customer service, so seek to understand. Allow the caller to finish his or her sentences and don't interrupt. Show concern for their question or problem. Don't be defensive. Rather, say things like, I understand, or I'm sorry to hear that. Once you feel you do understand, reflect the key points back to the caller and ask additional questions if you need clarification. Repeat critical information so you both will be clear. Placing callers on hold. Ask the caller's permission to place them on hold. Many times we've all been told to hold with no thought as to the reason for our call. Make sure it's okay to place the caller on hold. They may just want to call back later. Be aware of what they hear while they're waiting on hold. This is an important area that a lot of companies overlook. Continue the connection with your caller by providing a custom on-hold message during their wait time. Does the music and messaging they hear draw them into your company? Is the volume too loud or too soft? Are the messages relevant to your callers? On-hold messages can be a terrific way of continuing the conversation with your caller, even if you can't be on the phone.
So that's the end of that. I hope that was useful. So first of all, I hope that you've enjoyed today's session. I hope you got something helpful from it. Are you happy that I'm using these videos? Please, will you tell me yes or no? That's a closed question, so I just want a quick answer. Yes or no to videos?
Yes. Yes.
Everybody happy with it? Oh, that's good. I'm happy about that. Thank you. Good. How do you feel about where we are with this now? I'm covering the topics as it was laid out in the agenda. Are you? The next thing that we're going to be looking at is personality types, which is quite interesting. I want to base it on the Myers-Briggs personality types. So I've got a little bit to talk about that, but not too much. But next week we're going to talk about cultural issues in communication, client advisory relationship models, and building trust. So I've got a few things to be able to talk to you about next week. Has anybody, before I finish, has anybody got any questions that you'd like to ask? I'll take that as a no.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry, please. Sure, please.
Just a comment. Good morning.
Hi, good morning.
I don't know if anybody else is having this issue, but I find that in today's society, it's just so weird to communicate with people now, because you find that, not to mention some people, they answer you with LOL, which I find interesting. You're not texting. So this texting and this social media has kind of got some people crazy, not to mention the mask. I find myself having to depend more on nonverbal now, smiling with my eyes, crossing my heart to say, oh, thank you, or I'm sorry. So, and I'm not a lexicologist, but I depend more on my words to express my feelings. So this wearing the mask, this has really created a barrier for me to communicate. So I'm still trying to get used to this. Anybody else having this weird? I find communicating weird these days. I don't know.
Anybody like to join in the conversation? I totally agree. I think the masks don't help. I certainly think that some of the messaging now, whether you do it on WhatsApp or text messages or what have you, LOL, for example, you're absolutely right. It's just, well, yeah, yuck. It's not my favorite method of communication, I have to admit.
Sarah, I have a question. I'm just curious. I want to know, when you're talking about communicating and writing, is that at work with customers or your colleagues or outside of work?
I am finding I'm having issues communicating in
all aspects.
All aspects. It's some people are just, I don't know if it's COVID, but people are on the defensive, I think. And if you disagree, people think you're arguing automatically. I don't know. And I didn't find that before, but I'm seeing it more prevalent now, that I'm having more issues communicating, to the point where I just say, okay, you're right, when I know I disagree and I would like to comment, but because I know where it will lead now, I just say, you know what? You're right. Okay. I'm sorry. You know, just to diffuse, and because I could see where it's leading. I don't know. People are on edge. In customer service, like when I go to hotels and I'm trying to explain to them, and the part where he said about policies and procedures, that really irritates me. And I hear that a lot lately. And because I'm customer service oriented, I hate it. And so I said, no, policies and procedures are there as a guideline for you, but you can use your discretion. But people are just not, they're not going, they're not interested in going that far. Like, it's just, it is what it is. They just want to, hey, they don't want to go further than, it's the policies and procedures. That would be too much. It's just weird. And let's don't talk about trying to develop relationships with people. I could go on all day with that.
I don't think the masks helps. We're, I guess, fortunate that 2 weeks ago now, I think the government stopped the requirement to wear masks in this country. Having said that, the cases have started to creep up again now, and we have double the cases that we had the week before when people were still wearing masks. So clearly they're working, but yes, you're absolutely right. It isn't helping. I think I'd like to say it in a slightly, I'd like to rephrase what you're saying in a slightly different way. We have to try harder with our communication to get it right now. I think that's probably true.
Right.
Okay, well, I hope that you enjoyed today. We've reached the finishing time now. It's 11 o'clock Bahamas time. So I hope that you've received the PowerPoint from me. I've sent an email to everybody. Please check your junk folder if you didn't receive it.
I checked, but I don't see it as that.
Okay, well,
Yeah, I receive it as well.
you have received it, Nikita.
I did not. Yeah, I checked my junk and it's not there either.
Oh, really? Well, look. Wait a minute then. That's very strange because did you receive an email from Miguel this morning?
Yes, stating that class would start at 9.
I did. That's right. Well, I did a reply all to everybody on that email. But what I'll do then, I'll just go into here. I will just wait a minute, make sure it's the right one. Here we are, client relationship skills. Okay, so if you click on that now, you'll be able to download it into your computer. Do it quickly because as soon as Miguel switches off the session, it'll be gone. But you'll be able to get it from that. Perhaps I could ask Miguel, please, to also resend it to everybody just to make sure that people who aren't attending today also receive it. But hopefully you've now got everybody the PDF. So okay, thanks for joining us today. I hope that you enjoyed today. I've enjoyed being with you, and I look forward to seeing you back to the regular time of 10 till 12 next Saturday. Have a great weekend, everybody, and
take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.